Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you, as always, for taking the time to check out the live stream that we discuss each week on various topics related to fitness, nutrition, and things of that nature. So before I get started, guys, I do want to mention my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. I will have that link showing up at the end of this live stream. So be sure to watch out for that so that it will be available for you to see. And you can check out my website where I have a ton of information related to online coaching, as well as different ways that you can get valuable information, such as signing up to my email newsletter that I send out each and every week. You can also find information about my fitness blog that I send out each Friday. I usually send out a reminder of that each Friday, but it's posted on my website each Friday. So definitely check that out. There's a ton of information on there, and I will again have that address for you to put in at the end of this live stream. So, with all of that being said, guys, let's go ahead and talk about today's topic, which is over hydration hacks. So, this topic is a very important topic, I think, for various different populations or anybody who is wanting to, focus on improving their hydration, focus on improving water intake, and sort of understanding what the proper intake is when it comes to, depending on the type of person that, whether you're somebody who exercises a lot or if you're somebody who exercises lightly, what type of climate you live in. There's a bunch of different factors that basically play a role into what is proper hydration for you. So keep that in mind. But these are the topics that are going to be discussed today. We're going to talk about the signs of hydration, why hydration is important. We're also going to go over how to calculate your personal hydration needs, creative water alternatives, hydrating foods, nutrition that keeps you moisturized, hydration on the go, and hydration for athletes. So there's a bunch of different key points that I'm going to go over today. And I hope that this really does help to give you a little bit more insight on water intake because it's a topic that people are somewhat aware of, but they don't understand sort of the details of understanding what is proper water intake for their certain needs and situation. So the signs of hydration. So 60 to 70% of the human body is water, of course. So this is found in the cells, the tissues, and the organs. So water plays a key function in regulating the body temperature, as well as aiding in digestion and nutrient absorption. It supports the joint lubrication and mobility. It also helps to facilitate waste elimination in the body. So, water plays a huge role in various aspects of our daily lives, as well as helping to support the process of nutrition and muscle gain. It can also help with the muscle recovery process as well. So there's a lot of aspects to keep in mind when it comes to the science of hydration. So energy levels and brain health, there are benefits that come with, proper hydration with these key points. So dehydration, as little as 2% loss of body weight, can actually impair physical and cognitive performance. It's also important to maintain energy levels when you're having proper hydration in your body. Reducing fatigue by transporting oxygen and nutrients efficiently, it's better to have, staying hydrated can help to reduce that fatigue and just overall, dispersing nutrients properly in the body. So brain composition is roughly 75% water. So if you have less, of course, this is going to lead to poor focus and memory. It's going to increase your stress levels, and you're going to get headaches and migraines if you don't have adequate water intake. So it's not just the physical aspects. It does play a part in various cognitive functions, mental functions as well. So just keep that in mind when it comes to, being aware of, water intake for, various needs outside of just the physical need itself. So And then how to calculate water intake for personal needs. So baseline calculation, a general guideline is body weight pounds divided by 2, and then daily water ounces. So the example would be 150 pounds divided by 2. That would be 75 ounces a day for just a baseline calculation of water intake. It's also important to adjust for activity levels. Add 12 ounces per 30 minutes of exercise. So, for example, 75 ounces to 24 ounces for 1 hour workout equals 99 ounces a day. So, depending on your activity level, that's going to also make a difference in how much water you should get as far as your intake in the body. So, keep that in mind that again, this is just giving you a general guideline. Another, a couple other factors you do need to keep in mind is that you do need to be aware of the climate that you're in. If you're in a colder climate, then that's going to mean that your water intake is going to go down slightly. But if you're in a warmer climate, of course, you're going to have to consume a little bit more water because you're likely sweating. And so that's going to lead to, the loss of water. So very, very important to keep all of those different factors in mind as well. So current health and climate conditions can make a difference. So I did just touch on that, but I do want to expand on that. So consider your environment. So hot climates increase intake by 20 to 30%. Cold climates increase for heated environments, which can dehydrate. Health and dietary factors can play a key role. High sodium diet, you do want to add extra water because the salt is going to take water from your particular diet, and it can of course be important. They also recommend that if you're sick or you have an illness to increase, during any kind of fever that you may have or diarrhea. This can help to, you know, get those fluids in your body. And it's important because you're going to get really dehydrated if you're, ill or if you're sick in any way. So making sure that you have the adequate water intake is going to play an important role as well. So creative water alternatives. So there's also other art alternatives, that you can include outside of just water alone to sort of add variety to your hydration routine, boost nutrient intake, as well as making hydration a little bit more enjoyable. So it's very important to keep some of these other factors in mind if you don't want to just solely focus on, the hydration aspect of things or just, like the water itself, just solely focusing on water. You can also try other options as well. So some other options that you could include that can still be, reaching your hydration goals is to include some alternatives such as infused water. You can add fruits, herbs, or vegetables like cucumber, mint, and berries into your water to enhance flavor without added sugar. You can also try coconut water, which has natural electrolytes like potassium and magnesium. It's great for post-workout recovery as a drink. You can also include herbal teas, caffeine-free options like chamomile, hibiscus, or peppermint can be a great option. You can serve that hot or iced, of course, for any season. Sparkling water, carbonated, and you can also add a splash of lemon or lime for extra zest. So there's a bunch of different options to include just outside of just water alone. You can include these and you can still get your hydration, your proper hydration intake that you need for that day. So there's not only, we just talked about water and then, we're talking about creative ways to still get that water intake in your diet without just having to focus solely on consuming water. But the other point that I want to make is that food can also help with hydration. It can help to get the proper hydration intake that you need in your body as well. So you not only have those options, but you have food as well that makes a difference. So why hydrating food matters. So foods high in water content supplement fluid intake to support hydration. They also help to nourish skin, provide essential vitamins and minerals that promote skin elasticity and moisture. They boost overall health, rich in antioxidants and nutrients for energy and repair. So when we're talking about foods that play a role in hydration, there are many options out there. For example, you've got foods like cucumbers, vegetables. A lot of it's going to be primarily your vegetables and your fruits that are going to play a role. You've got so many different options when it comes to, I mean, think about it like apples, things like that. There's different foods that are going to have some sort of hydrating effect because they have that, a certain amount of water or, juice or nutrients in that particular food. So you can also just not consider, again, the water intake and the, infused options, but also the foods that you're consuming. Think about, are they, do they play a role? Another food like celery, you've got lettuce, anything like that's going to have some form of water that's going to, increase that hydration intake. So keep those points in mind as well. So I know I sort of went ahead myself again, but I did want to mention that, sort of giving you a clearer picture on the top hydrating foods. So, cucumber, 96% refreshing, low calorie, skin soothing silica is found in cucumbers. Again, that's what I just mentioned just a second ago, is that cucumber is made primarily of water. Watermelon, of course, 92% hydrates and supplies lipocene for skin health. Strawberries, 91% packed with vitamin C for collagen production. Lettuce, again, I mentioned lettuce as well, 95% crisp and nutrient light for hydration balance. Zucchini, 94% is made up of water. Antioxidants for skin repair and hydration. So, again, you need to think about primarily your fruits and your vegetables and things of that nature that are going to contribute to that. You can't just assume that all foods are going to have a hydrating effect. It's mostly going to be your natural options where you're going to see those, sort of effects. So if you are somebody that does track water intake, or, like I do, I track my water intake every day. And normally I don't usually consider foods. I normally don't think of foods as to add in my water intake because I always focus on tracking just water itself. You don't have to do that. That's the way I do it. Anything that's going to have some sort of hydration, like fruits or vegetables, you could include as a part of your water intake. Again, like when we're talking about like the sparkling water, the other options, as long as it's not something that's, to me, that's like overly carbonated or overly processed, I wouldn't include that, of course, when it comes to your water intake, because it's a lot of those types of, options are going to be, anything that's more processed is going to be more diuretic, to where it's basically like it's going to dehydrate you more, even though, like, we talk about like options, like when we're talking about like maybe coffee, or when we're talking about, it could also be energy drinks or something to that effect. Think of something that's more carbonated and something that, you know, you really aren't getting a lot of the, nutrients from that, I should say. Because of those types of options, they are generally going to dehydrate you, if that makes sense. I know I kind of talked in a circle there, but what I'm trying to say is specific options like that, like your more carbonated stuff, and it's going to, not really play into, hydration, because it's going to, go against that, because you've got sugars that's in there, you've got different types of chemicals, in other words, that are in those types of drinks. So that's, another thing. For example, another thing I do want to mention, like when you're talking about alcohol, that's another different thing. Even though it is you know, a drink, it's more diuretic, to where it's going to dehydrate you more. That's why, a lot of times people have to drink water, or if they, get like a hangover, they get sick, they have to drink water, after consuming a certain amount of alcohol because alcohol dehydrates you, in other words. So that's what I'm trying to get across there is that certain types of drinks can have that sort of effect because they don't have, those nutrients, they don't have that, hydration aspect of things. So going back to what we are talking about, hydration on the go. So there's many options to keep in mind to sort of stay consistent with your routine and trying to consume the proper amount of, water in your overall daily routine. So you can carry a reusable water bottle. You can use a lightweight, durable, eco-friendly bottle. Look for bottles with measurement markings. I do have a bottle like that I carry with me pretty often. Set hydration reminders. You can use apps, alarms, or smart water bottles. Aim for consistent sips, not gulps. So there's a few points I want to make into this point of hydration reminders. I actually use an app, and I've mentioned this app before, to where I track water intake, and this is called Water Llama, is the app that I use. And I do recommend it to anybody because it's a really simple app. There's nothing, it's just completely nothing but tracking water. It's a very simple app. And all you do is you put in, of course, I always just track solely my water intake. And usually I always, have, bottled spring water that I drink. And usually you can look on any bottled water and it's going to have 16.9 ounces for each bottled water. So normally I just round that up and say, okay, whatever bottle I drink, I add that in there that I, drink 17 ounces. And then throughout the day, I try to drink at least 4 bottles. And that gets me pretty close to my overall goal that I need to reach by the end of the day. So that's a great option to sort of remind you. Another thing is that with water intake, it's not about consuming it all at once. It's more about dispersing throughout the day, what you're drinking. You don't want to just, overload your body with, a ton of water all at once. You want to make sure that you are just dispersing that water intake throughout the day. So keep that in mind. You can also add, again, this is another aspect of sort of the creative methods that you could try to, add a little bit flavor to your water intake. You can use electrolyte packets for long days. You can also, again, herbal teas, infused water instead of sugary drinks that are going to be a great option. So Wayne has something here in the comments. So he says, I drink a lot of protein shakes, including supplements like creatine and BCAAs. Is there any concern about relying heavily on those for hydration? So generally, when we're talking about protein, protein intake is, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not extremely beneficial to your hydration, but I don't necessarily see it as something that can affect it. Um, when you're talking about like the creatine and BCAAs, I think you're going to get more from those because a lot of times with the BCAAs and the creatine, usually you're mixing that with water in some form. And that's going to help with, it's still going to contribute to your overall hydration. Um, Another thing too, like pre-workout can still contribute to your hydration as well, because a lot of times in pre-workouts you have, there may be like electrolytes in there. Another thing I do want to mention is sports drinks too can still, sort of play into that as well. Like when we're talking about like Gatorade or Powerade, anything like that, can still sort of contribute to that, water intake. One thing I do want to mention when it comes to like the sports drinks and what you need to be aware of too is like if you're doing a long workout and it's generally over an hour and a half or it's over an hour usually. what you want to focus on is getting more electrolytes in your body versus just water alone. And then if you're doing a exercise that's a little bit less than an hour, then you solely primarily want to focus only on water intake. Now, the electrolytes themselves, like we're talking about, getting over an hour, of your workout and using electrolytes, that's important to keep your energy levels, steady. And that's the reasoning for that, because you're going to get really dehydrated after a long session of workouts, and that water won't get you as far, in other words. So keep in mind that electrolytes and, sports drinks are a great option for going over that sort of hour, hour and a half sort of mark if you're in a workout. Um, you mentioned again, Wayne, protein with water. That's completely fine. Again, that's going to contribute to that water intake as well. The reason why I mentioned with protein why it's not necessarily as beneficial as like talking about, your BCAAs or creatine, because normally with protein you're not really mixing um, water with protein. I do sometimes, like you mentioned, but usually I don't. Usually I mix it with milk. So milk is gonna make a difference too because you're not gonna get as I'd say you still get nutrients from it, but I don't think it contributes as much to your overall, hydration intake. So I don't take that into consideration. Again, you just need to be aware of, you know, anything like again, I focus strictly on water intake. If I'm drinking solely water, that's what I track. And the way that I know that I'm getting, water intake is doing it that way. I feel like it's more clear than having to go through hurdles or in deciding, do I need to contribute this as, water intake? So I normally don't track those, even if, I'm drinking something other than water. I don't include it. I just focus solely on that water intake. Even like if I'm drinking something like a supplement with creatine, usually with water, I don't necessarily contribute that as a water intake. I just, don't include it. I just include solely water. And again, you don't have to do that. A lot of times with the apps, like I mentioned, Water Alignment, you can use those apps and they'll have other options of drinks you can track, and it'll more clearly give you a picture on roughly how much that contributes to your overall hydration. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's very helpful when you use those types of apps to where you understand fully, how that contributes to your hydration, because it can be kind of difficult to understand, the difference between water intake itself and then when you're talking about anything like protein or when you're talking about, drinking specific, if you're drinking like juice type drinks, it can kind of be confusing. So I would definitely use those types of resources to help with that. So I know I kind of went over a ton there, but I just wanted to be clear on, the best way to sort of clear that up. And again, I really recommend just focusing on tracking water intake alone because I think that's you have a more clear picture on how much water you've intake instead of going through all the other drinks themselves. But either way, you can still track other ways as well. So, why hydration for athletes matter? So, hydration is extremely important for somebody who is an athlete, or of course, somebody who's focusing on performance-based goals. So, this is, of course, to help maintain peak performance, prevent muscle cramps and fatigue, enhances recovery after training, and regulates body temperature during exertion. So, hydration tips for athletes pre-workout hydration. So generally, your timing should be 16 to 20 ounces of water 2 to 3 hours before exercise. You can add a pinch of salt or consume electrolyte-rich foods such as bananas or spinach. During exercise, you want to drink at least 7 to 10 ounces every 10 to 20 minutes. You could include electrolytes to replace lost sodium, potassium, and magnesium. For post-workout, you could drink 16 to 24 ounces of water for every pound of sweat loss, and you can include electrolytes that could also be foods. You could include drinks, sports drinks as well. But nuts and yogurt are an example of the types of food that you can include. And again, when we're talking about electrolyte-based drinks, again, you're thinking of Gatorade, Powerade. Those sports drinks are going to be in that sort of that realm. And then, of course, you want to focus on protein for recovery. Protein is important for aiding in the recovery process. But this is, I wouldn't say this is completely for athletes. If you're somebody who's doing an excessive training session, this could be also a great option too, to sort of be aware of, how to distribute your water when it comes to excessive exercise or, whatever type of activity you're doing. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I know I touched on a ton of different things, and I hope that it wasn't too confusing and that it was a little bit clearer to understand. Because I know when you get into ounces, different ounces of water, different types of water, or different types of ways to stay hydrated, it gets confusing. And again, like I said, I make it as simple as possible when I track water intake. I just solely track water intake because it just gets too confusing for me. So again, you can still track in various ways if you want to. Again, like I really need to show how that Water Llama app works because it does help to sort of understand. It's extremely simple. And you can go in there in the app and you can say, okay, I drank this amount of this particular juice. I drank this amount of coffee. And it's going to determine, sort of how that plays into that hydration. But just keep in mind that, water intake and tracking takes time to sort of get adjusted to. It took me a little bit, but once I had started using the app and really had it remind me daily, I sort of just got into the routine. It's the same aspect as tracking meals. Meal tracking was hard for me as well because it's something I'm not used to. If it's a habit you're not used to, it takes time to adjust to it. But you can track it. You'll feel a difference too. When you start to be aware of how much water you're intaking in your diet, you'll really feel a difference in how you feel when you include the proper amount of water that you need. It makes a whole lot of difference. And two, you'll notice that when you get dehydrated, you'll notice the difference between, staying hydrated and then when you feel that amount of dehydration. I can know when I'm at a point to where I feel dehydrated now. I used to not understand that feeling. Like, how do I know that I'm dehydrated? But you'll start to understand that as you get adjusted to it. But again, guys, thank you for taking the time to check this live stream out. I hope that you found it helpful and valuable. Again, if you have any questions about anything I discussed here today, you can feel free to reach out to any of the contact information I have here. You can also visit my website, again, bponlinefitness.com.